Yes, there's another Saturday with the technical challenges, but everything's okay. As you know, we're trying to do our broadcast live at 10 o'clock in the morning, like every Saturday. There's something special about knowing that we're all sitting together under God's authority, under His love for every one of us, together at the same time, even if we feel like we aren't together. We finished 5 weeks where we talked about and studied and put things into place, everything that has to do with the end of days, and we did that during a time that stresses a lot of people out, a time during a lot of worries and conspiracies and fears. And it's important to remember that there's only one that has no end of times, because he existed before the start of time. There's only one like that, only one that is outside of our own timeline, one that has no beginning and no end, unlike anything we know. I have a suggestion for every one of us. Never build yourself or your life on somebody that is limited to a timeline like you. Never rely on somebody who has an end, has a beginning and has an end, somebody who's going to expire sometime. That's something that we want to talk about today. We want to understand who we want to rely on every day of our lives, somebody who isn't reliant on our own time, as it's written in Chronicles, 1 Chronicles 1. Blessed are you, God, the God of Israel, our Father, that is from forever to forever. From Psalm 90. Now we read it. Sorry, I need to pull it up. Psalm 90, verses 1, 2. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world. From everlasting to everlasting, you are God. Who's the person who connected himself to a people that lives according to this timeline, that is connected over from generation to generations, that's faithful to his promises from the beginning of time to the end of time? Who is this person? The person that is from everlasting to everlasting. I think that is important to say these things so that we can go to a psalm that we'll look at this morning. It's a psalm that we're going to look at 3 verses, but only half a verse from those 3 verses is going to be our title this morning. So Psalm 31, verses 15, 16, and 17, maybe 14. No, sorry, 14, 15, and 16. But I trust in you, O Lord. I say you are my God. My times are in your hand. Rescue me from the hand of my enemies and from my persecutors. Make your face shine upon your servant. Save me in your steadfast love. I'm going to leave this verse here on the screen and pay attention to a few interesting things. It's not exactly our lesson. There is a stance here. He takes a stand here. It's taking a stand that is in contrast to what a lot of people think, and maybe even in contrast to my own personal feelings. But I, in Hebrew is explaining, this is saying, but compared to everybody else, but I, what am I going to do? And then there's trust and faith. I'm going to trust in you, Lord. And then what does he say? This faith that's in the heart also comes out of the mouth, is spoken. I say, there's a declaration here, you are my God. There is an importance to what we say, to what our mouth says. And then there's an understanding of reality. My times are in your hand. And this is our sentence for today. It ends with a prayer. Rescue me from the hand of my enemies and from my persecutors. Make your face shine upon your servant. Save me in your steadfast love. We said, my times are in your hand. What do these words mean? It's interesting to think about this picture of God having hands. He created us in his own image, and there's something that's difficult for us to understand, but God has hands in a way. I don't know if you understand who holds you, what kind of power we're talking about, how completely dependent we are, and how completely dependent we are on the understanding that we are in his hands. I don't know if you ever held a newborn and understand that if you just let that newborn fall, you don't even want to think about what would happen. It's a nightmare of every parent that the newborn child will fall out from his hand, that his hands won't be strong enough to hold his own child. That newborn child is so dependent on his parents. The hands of God. In Isaiah 40, there's a great expression of God's hands. Sorry, 40:12. Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand and marked off the heavens with a span? Everything he created with his hand, everything he holds in his hand, everything that he created. My times are in your hands. Times. It's in plural, my times. Not my time, but my times. We're living in a certain time right now, but we all also have different times in our life. David includes here all his life, all my life, every moment that I know, every moment I don't know yet, is in your hands. We see it in all the different Psalms that David wrote. We see it in all kinds of different situations. Times that are good, times that are bad, times that are easy and times that are difficult, times that go quickly and times that you just want to be over. Every time affects our life. These times make up our life. And we know that every time that we all have three different times in our life. There's what was, what is, and what will happen. Past, present, and future. In the last few weeks, we talked a lot about our future, about how wonderful it is and how secure it is. But our future isn't wonderful because I'm optimistic. But why? Because the one whose in hands I trust, whose hands I live in, he is good. It's not an optimism of good thoughts, but a confidence in who holds up my life. Let's look at these three times that we live: our past, our future. In your hands are my times are in your hands. Sorry. Your past, everything that happened, is in God's hand, and I put are in God's hand, and I put an emphasis here on God's forgiving hands. Everybody who can look into their past and see that there's a lot of days, a lot of months even, that were difficult, days that we want to forget, days that we think about the mistakes that we made, how much I disappointed others, maybe about how others disappointed me, the stumblings that we made, and maybe even sometimes I stumbled and I didn't know about it. All the times that I didn't want what God wanted. It reminds me of Peter. That Peter wanted a lot, but it didn't always happen according to what he wanted. But according to Peter, after his great mistake, we're also like that. He needed to meet the Messiah to take care of his past, to take care of what already happened. He needed to meet again Yeshua, who forgave him. He needed to meet Yeshua that met him with all the truth, with the truth in all of it. But Yeshua also met him with all the grace and forgiveness and love that he has, with all the mercy that only Yeshua can give. Despite everything Yeshua gave him, despite what had happened, he gave him a new calling to serve him, to feed his sheep. We know the verses. His grace overcame Peter's past, and also yours and also mine. And only overcame it, also freed him to worship God, to serve God. Peter knew, and I hope every one of us knows, that he can't live one moment, he can't deal with one moment of his past without the grace of the Messiah. Because it says something about the enormity of forgiveness that we have through the Messiah, that God has given to all those who come to him. It's just not putting a line over your sin, like marking it out. God erases sin and doesn't remember it. It's written in Isaiah 43, 43 verse 25. I am he who blots out your transgressions for my sake, and I will not remember your sins. It's not a recycle bin that you have on your computer that you can erase it and then bring it back. No. God decides to forgive you, to erase, to forget. A God that has no problems to remember decides not to remember your past, your sins. Because of the Messiah, brothers and sisters, we'll end this meeting and we'll celebrate the Lord's Supper together. Because of the Messiah, if you believe in him. If you don't believe in him, then there's a different path that you take. But if you believe him, he sees you, he sees all of us as holy, justified and holy, pure, not 99%, not 85%, 100%. That's what frees us. That's what frees us to live a holy life that glorifies God. Trying to live a life that glorifies God in order to receive this justification or this privilege. No, it's a gift. He gives us it. He forgives us, and he allows us to live this life. He frees us to live this life, this holy life for his glory. And through the Messiah that glorified us and purifies us, we're also free to forgive to whoever sinned against us, also to forgive ourselves. I know that there's a lot of people who are stuck in the past, stuck in this past that God says, this is in my hands, you don't need to be there. They're stuck in their past with bitterness, stuck in the past with jealousy, stuck in the past with revenge, and maybe even hate. And I'll say it like that. You know what? All these things, bitterness, revenge, hate, can be towards ourselves. I'm still trying to take revenge over something that God has already taken care of. I'm still bitter about what God blotted out and doesn't remember anymore. God wants to forgive us. He wants to free you of your past, even your biggest mistakes, even your greatest stumbles. They're in my hands. I took care of them. That's what God says. Too many believers neglect God's forgiveness and they choose to live in their sin. There's also those who neglect God's forgiveness, his atonement, and they say, God, I'm almost there. No, God says, it has been completed. I have forgiven everything, 100%. But not only our past, we deal a lot of times today with a lot of things. All the present with all its worries and with all its fears are in God's hands. In Psalm 139, it's a psalm that says how God knows us. 139. 139:5. You hem me in behind and before you lay your hand upon me. Here, you hem me and you surround me, you know me, you protect me. And you put your hands upon me, you lay your hand upon me. God doesn't need to check. I do once a week a corona check because I visit the old people's home. God doesn't need to check to do medical checks to know what I am. When I'm in his hand, he knows everything about me. He sees you right now. He sees you from every angle, from every direction. We have such a connection with God. That's the relationship that he wants us to have with him. He will not forgive us. We need to remember that there is no way that he'll let us go. There is nothing that will take us out from God's attention. You know how easy it is for us, and you don't need the ADHD in order to lose attention. We're focusing on something, and then something buzzes or something happens, and our focus just changes, and it starts needing to separate, to divide into two different points. God will always be focused on you. God's attention will always be on you. There's no way that his hands will suddenly let you go. There's no way that that can happen. It doesn't mean that our life is without problems. It doesn't mean that we won't experience pain or suffering or worries. Everyone has experienced this, and whoever hasn't experienced it, you will be hurt in the future. Everybody will experience pain and suffering. The question is, do I understand and do I know that I am in God's hands? In Isaiah 43, there's the verse, this promise that God promises his people, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. This is Isaiah 43:2. You will walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. What does God say to you? Whatever looks like is going to finish you off, is going to kill you, it's not going to happen because I'm with you. To end you, sorry. God can put out a fire. He just gives a small fruit and he will put it out. God can stop water. God stopped water. He put his people through the Red Sea. He helped his people cross the Jordan. But what did he say to them? I will not always stop the water. That's what he says. I will not always put out the fire. But when you go through the water that I won't stop, I will be with you. When the fire will burn around you, you will not be burned. Why? Because I am with you. I am with you. We know that fire and waters are symbols of pain and suffering that we all know. We all know that when you feel the heat of the fire. When there was this big fire in Haifa, we went to the Tirat HaKarmel in order to help bring people out. We were 200 meters from the fire, and we were feeling the heat. It felt like I had a flamethrower in front of my face. It was so powerful. We all know the feeling when you start approaching a heat that's threatening you. We all know the feeling when you're drowning and your mouth and nose are too close to the water. We all know that feeling, but God says, I am there with you. I have to say, truthfully, I had a lot of arguments with God about the way he protects me and protects us. I didn't always agree with him. Sometimes I felt, really, the fire is too close. Let's not exaggerate. Let's not stretch our limits. The water's already up to here. Sometimes it really stretched my faith. Stretched my faith so much that I could say I felt like it was break. But even in these moments of doubt, his hands were strong enough to hold me. Sorry. My times are in your hands, even these times. Isaiah, in chapter 63, verse 9, in all their afflictions, he was afflicted. In all our afflictions, in all our times of trouble, God isn't apathetic. He's also afflicted. He's also in pain. One of the greatest expressions about the Messiah is that he suffered with us. He's not disconnected from us. He's in connection with us. He was afflicted, and the angel of his presence saved them. In his love and in his pity, he redeemed them. It was never because we deserved it, but his love and his pity is on us. His mercy is on us. He lifted them up and he carried them all the days of old, all the days of the world, it says in Hebrew. Not only now is he holding us, we can hold on to all kinds of things that will hold us for a moment. There's one that lifts us up. He holds us all the days of the world. It's wonderful. We're not alone. So sometimes we feel everything's against us. Sometimes we feel like our problems are a mountain upon us. We can say this morning, my times are in your hands. These times are in your hands. We can turn our eyes to this mountain before us, and we can look past them to the one who can move mountains. As it says in Luke 1, Mary heard these words, this reminder. Luke 1:37. It's the God. It's Mary hearing the words of that the angel said to Michael too. What did he say? Sarah laughed, and then she heard these words. What Mary heard was the same words. For nothing will be impossible with God. And what's true for Mary, what's true for Sarah is true for every one of us today. What do you feel that today that is greater than you, but is also greater than God? There's nothing like that, but sometimes we feel that way. We think that way. We need to return to the truth, to the one that is from everlasting to everlasting. He saves us and he carries us every day of our lives. Nothing is impossible for him. We talked about the past and the present, that during this time that stresses us out, that causes us a lot of stress, and there's nobody who knows what we're feeling at this moment. But let's talk about our future. Our future is in the good hands, the guiding hands, and the faithful hands of God. We don't know how short our future is in this world. We talked about that already. There's no problem planning in the long term. You're allowed to plan to the long term. You're allowed to dream dreams. You're allowed to make savings. You should make a pension and all that. It's good to plan for the future, but our true security is being in the really long term, is thinking in the really long term, in the everlasting term, what they might say, a term that is from everlasting to everlasting. Our true security and the questions that we need to ask ourselves is, where are we going to spend eternity? With whom are we going to spend eternity? We talked about it a lot in the last few weeks, but it continues to be true. How much time, how much worry how much effort do we put into worrying about the short time that we have left here instead of worrying about everlasting? The person who holds us has a vision for our life. He has a plan, a perfect plan for us. We know the verses in Jeremiah 29. It's one of the verses that we know by heart almost. When God says to his people, "For I know the plans I have for you," declares the Lord. I don't know if you need more confidence than God saying, "I know and I have everything planned." For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare, not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. God says, I have thoughts about you. He has hands that hold us up. And he has thoughts about us as well. Thoughts of peace, plans for welfare, not for evil. Yes, there's fires, there's waters, there's drownings. It's closer and it's further away sometimes. But he plans for welfare, not for evil. What does he want to give you? Not only good, the comfortable life today, but to give you a future and a hope. A future and a hope. Everything is pointed to there. That's what's important to remember during difficult days. And because of this truth, we have a challenge. What's this challenge? Challenge to believe, to trust him. In Psalm 37, it says, 37, verse 5. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in Him, and He will act. Trust Him, and He will do. He will complete what He started. Trust Him, give Him control. Let Him guide you. Who can guide us better in this life than the one who knows the plan, knows the map, knows the way? Who? Do you have better ideas? There's only one, and there's no by chance that the Messiah called Himself the way, the truth, and He's also the life. Many want the Lord in their life, Yeshua in their life, but they are afraid, really, to give Him the first place in their life. And that's a challenge. Because we don't know what will happen then. We don't know what kind of consequences will happen if I really let Him control my life. But what do we have to be afraid of? What are we afraid of? What's more secure than trusting and to be under the guidance of the one that our times are in His hands? The future is in His hands and is known to Him. Isaiah 46:10, it says, got the wrong one. 46:10. 46:10. Declaring the end from the beginning to the end, from ancient times, things I have not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand and I will accomplish all purpose. He knows everything, everything's in control. Why shouldn't we put our hands in the one who is willing to go on to death in order to save us? In Romans 8, Romans 8:32. Sorry. Is there no greater place to be in His hands? Do you need another proof of His love other than the one who didn't even hold His own Son, kept His own Son to Himself, but gave Him to us, for all of us? Do you have a better idea where to put your future? Do you have a better idea to who you want to give your children's future to? People who you love and are precious to you? Sometimes we don't understand the ways of God. And it could be that also myself are confused, don't know what to do. Sometimes we don't understand what's going on around us and the meaning behind it. God isn't only truth, but He's so real as well. There's a guy that we read about in Psalms. We call him Asaph, and he explains this in Psalm 73. 73:14. For all the day long I have been stricken and rebuked every morning. And he's asking, why are all these evil people are able to do all these things, and I feel so terrible every morning after every morning, and I don't see how it's going to end. But then something happens. He comes before God, the holy God, from the God who's from everlasting to everlasting, the God whose times are in His hands. And He says this. Because what happens in the end is what is important. What's going to happen, the judgment upon the evil people, that's what's going to matter. How God is going to judge them. He put His hands in He put His future in God's hands, and what does He say? Nevertheless, in verse 23, in contrast to the situation, it doesn't matter how I feel, it doesn't matter what I think. Nevertheless, I'm continually with you. I'm on your side. There is a stance here. Takes a stand. You hold my right hand. You hold my right hand. You guide me with your counsel. And pay attention. And afterward, you will receive me to glory. You guide me with your counsel, and afterwards you will receive me to glory. I'm in your hands, and you're holding my hands. And that's not only today, and that's not only tomorrow. This glory, this true glory, is where? With you. And only you can take me there. So wonderful. God wants to guide us till the end, until home, until He brings us to Him. And He's not going to give up on you. That's what God promised the people of Israel when He walked and when He led them. It says in Deuteronomy 31, it is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. It's not by chance that the Bible and the New Testament that says a God that sees His people. It says that as a shepherd, that God is a shepherd and that Jesus, that Messiah is a shepherd. When Jesus was here, He talked about His flock, and He gives us this promise to His flock. John 10:28. I give them eternal life, and they will never perish, and no one will snatch them out of my hand. No one will snatch them out of my hand. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. There's nothing sadder than to see believers who live in uncertainty. I'm in God's hands, but we'll see what happens. No, there's somebody more powerful. Somebody is in control, and God says, that's me. I hold you. You don't hold me, I hold you. And there's no force on earth that can take you from my hands. With this understanding, we can expect the unknown. I don't know if I wrote this. In God's hands, we're invited to live and to expect the temporary unknown and to the known eternity. We think about the eternity as something far away and more fixed. No, the temporary is more unknown to us than the eternal. And we can expect and to be certain and to have joy that we know that we're going through these unknown times that are difficult, but it's temporary. But we're going towards the known eternity that He will take us to Him. It is wonderful. So the question that every one of us had, in the hands of who do we live? Did you surrender to Him entirely? This hand that we're talking about now, the strong hand of God, the hand of God that guides us, that takes care of us, that loves us, that forgives us, and erases sin. This hand is outstretched to every one of us. Every one of us. To those who have not received Yeshua yet, you need Him. But it's also, His hand is reached out to those who have forgotten and thought that, of course I'm in God's hands. Maybe there's people who feel like that. No, it's grace upon grace. It's a love that is unable to understand. It's something that you can't get used to. It's wonderful every time anew. Every one of us, if He doesn't hold you today, He won't hold you forever. There's only one that doesn't have the end of days because He didn't start existing with time. There's only one who's from everlasting to everlasting, and there's only one that you should build your future with. A person who isn't on our own timeline, a one who's always relevant. And I hope that every one of us, I don't know if it's the first time that you are willing to say this, or if it's the 1000th time that you're saying this. I hope that every one of us can say these 3 verses, that everyone can take a stand, but I, in contrast to everything that's happening around me, that even sometimes I think, but I, and every one of us can stand in faith, in heart, and also in your mouth. And every one of us can say and understand the truth of being in God's hands. And every one of us can say this prayer. What does He say here? But I hope that you're praying these words together with me. But I trust in you, O Lord. I say, you are my God. My times are in your hand. Rescue me. Make your face shine upon your servant. Save me in your steadfast love. Make your face shine upon your servant. Save me in your steadfast love. I hope that this is your prayer this morning. We are so dependent on Him. Our times are in His hands.
דבר אל ליבי ישוע, מול פחד וסערה, גלי הספק שטפוני, החזק בי שלא אטבע, מילים משתיקות הסעה, מילים מביאות תקווה, דבר אל ליבי ישוע, ניטע בקרבי שלווה. דבר אל ליבי ישוע, אנוח בסק נחת, מקלט לנפשי נחת, אמחה דמעותיי בך, מילים מרפאות הצעה, מילים של חמלה וחום, דבר אל ליבי ישוע, אין בקרבתך שלום. דבר אל ליבי ישוע, בדבר אלוהים אשמה, אמת מילתך אשש בי, עצב אותי לדמותך, מילים שבורה בכוח, מילים של עידוד ועוז, דבר אל ליבי ישוע, בחרי וצור האור. דבר אל ליבי ישוע, בקול של דממה דקה, חקור נא ליבי עזרני, ללמוד לציין